Welcome to the Tough Decisions Network for Entrepreneurs. I'm Dan Hanford, and my wife, Danae, and I interview successful people sharing stories behind tough decisions that they've had to make along their journey as an entrepreneur. Before we get started, let's hear from one of our sponsors. Want daily interviews with real estate investors and none of the fluff? Go to bestevershow.com, where Joe Fairless interviews real estate investors and entrepreneurs daily about their best advice ever. Go to bestevershow.com. On the podcast with us today is Jeff Davis. Jeff has built multiple national companies and has been featured in Fortune magazine, CNN, Money. He's been quoted by Inc. magazine and featured in countless other news stories. In 2014, he successfully exited a national medical legal trial presentation company and sold that company to a biotech company, which then became publicly traded soon after that. He has now founded a national by invitation only community of CEOs and entrepreneurs known as 12 Mavens, which the Business Journal described as the secret society of CEOs, and he is the founder of the popular annual strategic planning event, Plan the Attack. He's dissected human cadavers at med school, he's competed as a skateboarder, and he is about to take his family to live in 29 countries over the next 12 months. And in between it, all shares his unique perspective of the world in his keynote speeches. Welcome to the podcast, Jeff.
Thank you so much. That's a generous intro. I appreciate it.
I want you to walk us through, where you've been and kind of how you got to this point in your career as an entrepreneur.
Yeah, lifelong entrepreneur. I go back and I think of stuff when I was a kid that were definitely signs of being an entrepreneur. When I was not even old enough to drive a car yet, I had my parents drive me down to the corporate headquarters of this multi-billion-dollar company to pitch a clothing line. It was like a giant chain of retail stores. And I pitched this clothing line. I think I literally had one business card that I used scissors to cut all four sides out of. And my parents drove me there. I pitched it, and they actually bought the line and put them in like 40 markets across the U.S. In college, I was into skateboarding, and so I found a wood manufacturer in San Diego. And in between my college classes, I cold called every skate shop in America. I mean, I didn't know the word cold call. I just knew I'm going to call them all and see if they'll get my skateboards. I did that to help pay for college. In 2003, I always could draw, draw pictures really well, but I've always been really entrepreneurial. So I've always built some kind of a business around something I was passionate about. I was passionate about skateboarding, so I started a skateboarding business. I was passionate about drawing stuff, but entrepreneurial. So I ended up getting a master's degree in medical illustration, started this company in 2003 doing anatomical and surgical illustrations, drawings for litigators, for trial lawyers. And it was just me and my parents' converted garage. And then I moved into corporate headquarters, which was a 500 square foot studio apartment. But it was apartment 1104. On my business cards, I put suite 1104. So it looked like a real thing. I had an 800 number that rang in there. I had a website, all the stuff. And I spoke in language like we and our. People would call, I'll check with our accounting. And I'm sitting there in my boxers in a little tiny studio apartment. Hired my first employee, hired another person, other things. And, outgrew an office space, got a bigger office space. And we had 2 stories of employees. Outgrew that space and ended up selling the company 11 years later. And I joked that I retired for all of about 4 days and was back to contributing and growing and doing stuff. It's an inability to sit still.
That's interesting because that journey sounds very similar to my own and Danae and I's journey where, when I started our very first company together, it was a company called Shop Anatomical, and it was an online-based company, and it was literally out of our townhouse that we had rented together. And it was funny because, we did the same thing. Like we would have customers call up and they'd say, hey, if I order this product today, can I get a discount on this of like 5%? And I'm like, well, let me put you on hold and ask my manager and see if I can get that approved. I'd put somebody on hold, go to the kitchen, check on my wife, ask her, hey, can I give this customer a discount? She's like, all right, sure, why not? And then I go back to the phone and I'd be like, yeah, sure, my manager just approved the discount for you.
Well, you definitely did really ask the boss if you're asking your wife.
Yep, that's very true. That's very true. But we have very similar stories like that. That's pretty cool.
Mm-hmm.
So I want you to talk to us about, some tough decisions that you've had along this journey that you've been on. And I want you to first cover a tough decision that I like to call a sore thumb tough decision that kind of sticks out like no other tough decision, and it did not have a very good outcome. It kind of hurt really bad. And so we can kind of, dissect that a little bit and learn some lessons through that tough decision that you had.
Okay. I'd say one tough decision that ended up exploding in my face was I had been frustrated with hiring some sales guys and decided if I hire 2 sales guys, then they'll compete with each other and they'll push each other and can help each other. And neither one of them was really in the interviewing a culture fit. And I'd been, had some frustrations with some younger salespeople, and these guys had, kind of a little silver hair. They were both a good amount older than me. And it would be obviously a big expense for a small, young entrepreneur, small, business that to go from, not having those 2 guys to both their base salary. That was a tough one. And in that case, and that can work, the 2 sales guys that kind of compete. But in my case, they ended up validating each other's excuses for sucking, and they were not a culture fit. And it was just awful. It was just burning cash like nobody's business at record speeds before I ended up firing both of them.
Now, how soon after you put both of them in place did you make the decision to let them go?
6 months from the hire date to the fire date. About 6 months.
Was that about 6 months too long?
Yes. Definitely 6 months too long. I'm one of those people, guilt issues. I give them a chance. But I believe you should first be really clear about communicating what the problem is and how they can improve it, and then give them another chance, or, when they don't do it, depending on what they do. But, so I think nobody, like Jack Welch had a thing about nobody should be surprised that they're getting fired because it's bad communication. And so I would verbally tell them, then a written report conversation, and then here's like what really needs to happen. It's getting bad. And then it just was lights out. But it was kind of tough because for what we did, there's several months of training and just learning how to be able to talk about what we do. So for the first month or 2, you don't really know because they're still learning how to make the presentation and about the industry. And
so they didn't really get a chance to kind of show you their cards yet until a couple months down the road. And then you kind of gave them a few more chances and things like that.
Yeah, it's funny because I have similar to a lot of entrepreneurs. We can be ready, fire, aim, and that's how I was. I get this idea and I'm just like, let's do it. And I was having a conversation with a fellow CEO the other day about something, and he said, yeah, let's run spreadsheets on that. And it's funny just hearing that, because I was thinking back in the day, spreadsheets, my thing would be like, bring in the people and put it into execution mode and let's see how it plays out, which, it was just, sometimes when you're young and getting some early success, it can really screw you up because you're like, it's like that song, all I do is win, 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 no matter what. And then you're like, yeah, not so much. You can kind of think that when you're early 30s, guns blazing, doubling. We doubled staff. We quadrupled office space. We're growing into new cities. We went from me and my parents converted a garage to, clients in almost 40 states around the country pretty quick. We got featured in Inc. magazine, featured in Fortune. And, it was kind of one of those things where like, I'm a genius. And then, no, you're not. You just, you had a couple of good moves and outworked a lot of people. And so, I would be 3 a.m, 4 a.m, suit and tie downtown, either coming or going. I'd look up at these big towers that all the lights were out. And I remember kind of mentally pounding my chest saying, I'll outwork anybody. And so, I had a lot of that momentum to kind of cover up some stupid decisions.
Well, it's interesting because, you can sit there and do the whole, fire, ready, aim, which I'm guilty of myself, in many, many instances. But sometimes you need somebody else in your circles to be able to balance you, to be able to kind of take a step back and go, let's start to, aim, get ready and then fire, And
that ended up being life-changing for me. And I burned through 6 figures in cash in 6 months that I had, sitting in an account, which, in your early 30s, it was, not pipeline, not perceived value, like actual money that you would pay for your kid's college one day, or buy your dream house, or, like gone quickly. And I remember just, literally crying, thinking, man, I worked so hard. Like, it just didn't feel right because I worked so hard. I did, all the things I sacrificed. I ate ramen noodles and worked till 4 a.m, all stuff. And just to watch it all go so fast like that, it was gut wrenching. And I remember thinking, if I had just put a group of smart business owners, entrepreneurs, and CEOs in a table and said, hey, here's what I'm thinking about doing. What do you guys think? If just one person had said, well, yeah, but what happens if, and said, I would have just said, oh, that's true. Line through the idea, move on to the next idea, and I would have never even known the impact that little it could have been a 3-minute conversation would have had on me. And, I just would have been like, oh yeah, that was a kind of dumb idea, whatever, or I would have protected myself to keep what happened from happening in a different way. And so I surrounded myself with smart business owners who are going through similar challenges and growing, and everybody was having amazing growth and support, and we helped each other in all kinds of ways. And I remember thinking, man, if I ever sold my company and I could just do whatever I want, this would be amazing. And that's exactly what happened. And I started 12 Mavens with a couple of dudes that we just took what was kind of a casual thing and we added structure to it. And we added like a framework to the meetings. It was just kind of too casual, and built this thing, and then filled the group, started a second group, filled the group, started a third group, filled the group, started a group in another city, then another city. And it's like, here we go again. And so, a big part of the reason why I'll be traveling to all these countries is we see this as a by invitation only community of entrepreneurs and CEOs all over the world. And so, we're planning to start, expanding our network that way.
So I want to go back just a few steps here and talk a little bit about this tough decision that you brought up, because I want to ask you, what did you do differently moving forward that you got rid of those 2 salespeople? Did you do anything differently to mitigate that moving forward?
What's funny is I realized in that scenario, and again, this is a specific scenario, so I don't want people to hear this in cookie cutter that this means it's the exact same thing is true in their business. But in my scenario, I realized the amount I was spending on salespeople, if I invested all of those thousands of dollars into some of the direct response marketing that we were doing, into letters, into postcards, into the website, into conventions, or into just different things, and we tested that, and it was a better ROI. I think going forward, any other person that I would hire for sales, in the future, I would do some kind of a behavioral assessment, like a cognitive testing on to see, are they wired to be a closer? Because now you can kind of hack that with data, based on hundreds of thousands of salespeople taking personality profiles. You can get a pretty accurate, prediction, not 100%, of if that kind of a person is just naturally wired to be a closer or not. Because I would try to take somebody who had a nice personality and they look like a successful executive, And I would, try to turn them into that. But at the end of the day, if they're just not wired that way, they're never going to be great. So that would be something that, I took for that. And then what I did was, because I was really flying by the seat of my pants a lot. And, you heard my work schedule, 3 a.m, 4 a.m, coming or going all of the time, every night, every weekend. And then what happened after that, when I reached my pain threshold, and, you get to that point where you say, that's it, I can't take it anymore. And that was it for me. And I was overworked and I was just kind of flying by the seat of my pants. And what I did was I decided to skip work one day. I told my staff, I'm not coming in on this one Friday. And I said, I'm just going to go to, a remote place, and I'm just going to spend the entire day with a pad of paper and a pen and just try to figure this thing out, because I was burned out. I was working around the clock and I wasn't making what I, had hoped. And so I know everybody where I live. Like, I can barely go anywhere without running into somebody that I know. And so I live in Jacksonville, Florida. Just outside of Jacksonville is a little quaint beach town called Amelia Island. And so I drove all the way to Amelia Island and picked a random coffee shop. And I was like, I've got, had a baseball hat pulled down, and I was like, I'm just going to go in here and spend all day long in here. And I walk in, and one of my friends calls me on my cell phone. And because my friends are weird, or different, I should say, my daughter tells me, don't ever say something's weird. I'm like, okay. But anyway, he calls and says, I see you. And I said, no, you don't, unless you're at a Starbucks in Amelia Island. And he said, you mean standing next to 3 ladies all wearing hats? God, man. So I walk out of there and I drive to the Ritz-Carlton Hotel. And I was like, this will be perfect. Nobody's from here. It's all people visiting. I park my car. I walk in like a boss. Like, I'm not I don't have a room there. I'm not even buying lunch or anything. I just walk in there with a pad of paper, park myself in the lobby with this beautiful view of the ocean. And I just sat there for hours and hours and hours and hours, just figuring out, what is it? Why am I so entrenched in my business? What's keeping us from being able to double or quadruple? What would I need to delegate? What would I need to automate? What would I outsource? Who would I need to hire? How could our marketing be better? How could I plan for an entire year? Instead of just, it's been a while since we did some marketing. We should do some marketing. And you just look at the year from 30,000 feet and, thinking about all these things. And it was a life-changing day. And it wasn't overnight, but over the next few years, I went from working, easily 80-hour work weeks and every, weekend down. I got myself down to 40-hour weeks. And then I got myself to where I stopped working Fridays altogether, to where at the point when I sold my business, I was literally only going there 1 day a week and not working remotely 4 days a week. Like, I literally only worked on that business the 1 day that I came in. And even on that day, I'd take a nice lunch break and I'd meet somebody for some coffee in the afternoon. And then I left at about closing time. And all the buyers, when I would have meetings with potential buyers, none of them believed me. They all thought I was just trying to make them feel good about it, but it was true.
Jeff, tell us a little bit about your strategy for making tough decisions. What is it that you do? How do you approach those decisions?
I mean, I think it depends on what the thing is, but sometimes I think reverse engineering is really helpful. You think about what's the end outcome that I really want to get out of it. Like, not so much as what am I going to do and what will be the result of that maybe, but really what's the outcome that I want to achieve. And then I think about, what would need to happen before that and before that and before that and before that and before that. I'll think, what's the biggest obstacle preventing that thing from happening? I think, honestly, just sitting still with a piece of paper and a pen can really help a lot when you actually just take the time to really think it out, and then to continue to be like, well, how else might I do that? And what might be another way to do that? And then an important step that I was missing that I do now is getting other people's opinions, getting an outside perspective, getting, other people's point of view. But ultimately, you got to make the decision. I've had everybody tell me not to do something that ended up being a great decision. So you can't just trust people blindly. But a lot of times those other conversations can help you. It's so much better to have the thing blow up, just sort of hypothetically in a conversation where somebody's playing devil's advocate or think, well, what if type scenarios.
I think a lot of it depends on who you're asking, because sometimes you can ask, 10 people, but if it's 10 people that, they want the best for you, but they don't think that idea is a good idea. And again, you're not just trying to ask as many people as possible if something's a good idea to find that one person that thinks it's a good idea. You have to balance it.
Yeah. And sometimes you would think they want the best for you, but sometimes even if they don't realize they're doing it, your idea could make them feel a little less significant. And even if they don't realize they're doing it, they might point out all these things that could blow up. Again, this could be even at a subconscious level that they're really kind of fearful that you are going to make them feel less significant if you do this thing. And they could be pointing out these things, kind of hoping that you don't distance them. And these could be people that really care about you and love you. Also, I just had a conversation with an entrepreneur this morning. It was talking about all of his friends who were all, employees at big companies were, saying all these things to him, like, oh, how are you going to make money? And And I said, well, in those kinds of conversations, that's what's great about being around other entrepreneurs is we don't think like that. We think, how could you do it? And then how could you scale it? And how could you market it? And how could you sell it? And, all these things about it. We're not thinking in a more scarce, fearful, just get that, play it safe all the time.
Yeah. So
mentality.
Jeff, what's a book or a resource that you'd recommend to our listeners, either directly related to decision-making or, in your journey as an entrepreneur that's helped you?
I would say first, before even any particular books, it kind of depends on where you're at, because a book that was like, at one point, 2 years later could be the best book you ever read, and vice versa. Could be, oh my God, this book's amazing. I read it when I was first starting out, and then you read it again now, you're like, that's like stuff you hear a million times. Also, it kind of depends on what you're really trying to figure out. And so the reason I bring all that up is, I think you should just constantly be going through books like crazy on every topic that might benefit you down the road, might benefit you right now, and be realistic about it. If you're like me and it's hard to sit still and read a whole page, listen to audiobooks. Listen to audiobooks at 1.5 speed, get the executive summaries and watch like 4 of those. I have actual books I'm reading and I have audiobooks that I'm listening to like constantly. And so as far as decision making, I'm actually right in the middle of the book, The Road Less Stupid, which so far has been really good.
I want to shift gears here just a little bit and talk to you about some of the things you've done with the money that you've made so far. I know in our introduction, we talked about how you're getting ready to go on this 12-month, journey of traveling with your family, with your 2 children, and going to 29 different countries and living in those countries over the next 12 months. So that's really exciting. Outside of that, what would you say is the number one thing, not the number one thing, but one of the most exciting things that you have done, whether it's being traveled or some item you've purchased with the money that you've made as an entrepreneur?
I'd say the most exciting was maybe the day I bought my Maserati. Now, I wouldn't say it was the smartest thing, but as far as exciting, getting the keys and getting in it and saying, holy crap, and then going really fast for the first time. That was exciting. Getting my kids in it and giving them their first ride in it was exciting. But it's sort of, I don't know. It's like it's one of those things where it's like, once you checked it off, you kind of, at least for me, it kind of changes to what else. And I told my wife, I'd spent the first, all these last few years trying to get to this big house and get to this really fancy, cool car. And now that we're traveling for a year, I told her what's exciting to me is not having a house or a car. It's like amazing. I was like, wow, I won't even have the keys. This is going to be so cool.
So what's the next item on your bucket list right now?
I think really it's related to 12 Mavens, our CEO roundtable groups, and our annual event, Plan the Attack. But honestly, I don't know if it's like just getting older, but I used to want a fancy watch. I haven't even worn a watch in probably a year. I'm kind of like, I've had my Maserati for 4 years now, and I'm sort of like, I think it's going to be cool to just go country to country more so than to have it. Who knows what I'll get when I get back to town. But so like for me, really what's exciting is imagining that there's a 12 Mavens group in freaking Australia or France or England or, or Africa and hopping in and getting to sit in a meeting with people from that country, knowing that there are families in a country that I might not have even ever been to, that their daddy is coming home a little happier. Like, to me, that I seriously, if you could see me on this podcast, I have goosebumps on my arms right now thinking about that day that I sat there at that Ritz-Carlton with the pad of paper, disconnected, thinking about how to change my business and my life. And that ended up becoming the annual event, Plan the Attack, that we do every December. That's, an all day long, just like working out all that kind of stuff. It's all the stuff that's the hardest thing for an entrepreneur to do, sit still. And literally it's kind of, to me, I get goosebumps when I talk to somebody who went to that and they told me they're taking their first vacation in 7 years. Like that, I've literally had that conversation where they called me from an airport, taking their wife for the first vacation in 7 years. And I want to cry, man. I'm super passionate. You guys will see if you come to the event at the end of it, like I'm literally trying not to cry as I'm like, winding it down. But it really is my passion and just imagining, we started having people flying in for this event now from all over the place and watching that grow, whether I'm even, involved like 30 years from now. I'd love for more and more people to be affected by it. And so, more so than getting some kind of cool, shiny object, for me, what's really exciting is just imagining that for me, it's imagining a world where the vast majority of entrepreneurs wake up inspired to work on their business and they're being rewarded for all the hard work that they put into it. Because so many of us, you wake up and the anxiety starts to pour in, versus waking up excited. And it's important to me to be a great father. It's important to me to be a great husband. And it's important to me to now help as many families affected by entrepreneurs and business owners and CEOs be able to live their best life possible. To me, that's exciting. I'm actually doing this podcast from sitting in my wife's car at the beach right now. It's we don't know when this goes live, but this is a weekday at 3:04 p.m. and we'll end this recording and I'll go sit with my wife and 2 kids on the beach.
That's exciting. Well, I want to, let you get back to your family here. So, Jeff, I really appreciate the time you've taken, to be with us on the podcast. I really like what you're doing. I want to, be involved in any way I can to be able to help and support you as well. So please, let me know what Danae and I can do to help you. How can the listeners reach out to you to get more information from you or try to follow you or try to, be a part of what you're trying to do?
Thank you for saying that. And I genuinely do reply to every email. I love helping, whether they get involved in any way. if I can help any of your listeners, I'm happy to do that. I'll give you my direct email is Jeff, Jeff, at plantheattack.com, plantheattack.com. If they want to go to the event, we do it every year in December. So as 1 year's ending, the new year's starting. It's a beautiful place. It's like you could throw a tennis ball and hit the ocean, which is not bad in December. And that's just plantheattack.com. As far as our groups, we're in more and more cities all the time. That's 12mavens.com, like the number 1, 2, M as in Mary, AVENS, 12mavens.com.
Well, thank you so much, Jeff. I hope you have a wonderful rest of your day.
Thank you. What you guys are doing is amazing. Keep it up.
All right. Thank you. Bye-bye.
All right.
Thank you for listening to the Tough Decisions Network. Be sure to visit toughdecisions.net to gain access to show notes for this episode and to join our free weekly entrepreneur email where we will send you news about the latest technology for your business, inspiring quotes, and the latest books for entrepreneurs. That's toughdecisions.net.